Does it make sense to you that Florida, the Sunshine State, has far fewer solar panels than Massachusetts, where it's freezing cold? No, it didn't make sense to me either. So what is happening here? So like many other situations in which the general public ends up being screwed, special interests are at play here, Mark. So it turns out that utilities companies are preventing the installation of solar panels in people's homes because they're really concerned about competition, about losing market share. So they're working with politicians and lobbying Congress and doing whatever they can to ensure that states enact rules that prevent this from happening, that prevent encroachment into their space.
Why doesn't this surprise me?
I know.
But there's two different ways of getting solar electricity. And one is by collecting it and storing it and then using that stored energy in your own home. And the other is just to collect it and feed it directly into the grid, where then it would offset your cost. And that way, you're just supplying the raw material of energy to the electric utilities companies.
Yes, you're right. So you would think, why wouldn't utilities want to have a higher supply? Well, the reason why they may not want to is because you can potentially create a situation where it's much more sustainable to have solar panels than it is to feed the grid. Moreover, utilities are already heavily invested, right? So they maintain the electrical grid, right? The switches, the knobs, the entire infrastructure was built by these utilities companies. So they must be thinking like, wait a second, we invested a lot of money in this time, energy, R&D, developing what we have, the current system now, to have like these other solar companies come and take it all away. So it's interesting. We have to think about sort of the progress that we're making in the energy space, but also the business interests and why they would be so interested in keeping this new technology away. Now, in terms of Florida and seeing what's happening, say in Florida as opposed to like California, it's not just Florida that's being affected. So there are some other southern states that are being affected as well, like Virginia and South Carolina. And they too don't have solar panels, and it's not for lack of demand. So as Will Craven, the spokesman for Solar City, states, we get all kinds of inquiries every day. People there want to be our customers. So what's happening, Mark? Why aren't they their customers? Why can't they put these solar panels up?
Well, of course, you have a lot of money lobbying to keep things as they are.
So what the utilities companies are doing is that they're preventing leasing agreements. And typically what happens is that a family will lease the solar panels from a solar panel company and will pay the cost of the panels over time. They're incredibly expensive. They're like $100,000 to get these things installed. So it's hard to just kind of fork over that kind of money. So usually they cut deals and the families pay over time. Now, in states where you don't see solar panels, lobbyists have made sure that these leasing agreements are essentially illegal. They've also removed other incentives like tax breaks and government subsidies. So in California, we see lots of solar panels. That's because we have tax breaks, government subsidies, and we don't. We have leasing agreements. We don't have them in other states.
It's quite unfortunate. I'm going to be a whiny liberal hippy dippy because it only makes perfect sense that eventually, in the not too far future, we're going to have to move away from fossil fuel. There's no doubt about it. The infrastructure needs to start being replaced with infrastructure that can support solar energy.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, but I think that in the short term, companies are really interested in making that short-term profit, right? So states like Florida have extensive coal available to them.
And
so
nuclear
they have
plants.
And nuclear plants. So they have all different forms of energy available to them. They don't necessarily want to go the solar route yet. So I think the burden sort of falls on us a little bit to try to put together a good business case in order to incent them to move the needle towards alternate forms of energy that are much more sustainable. Because right now what they're doing is not every time, but many times when solar companies say even like, we're going to give you free solar panels. So for example, in South Carolina, there were objections from utility companies to 80 contracts under a solar firm that was going to provide free of charge solar panels to churches and school districts. We're not even getting these things for free because we have the utilities industry lobbying so much on this issue.
I think it's pretty obvious to everybody that in a matter of a decade or two, we're going to be at the end of the line in fossil fuels. And so we have to start investing now in the infrastructure of a sustainable energy grid. There's no way around it. There's no way around it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So we need to find a way so that the utilities companies and new companies that are emerging like solar energy can figure out a way to both be essentially profitable if we really want to move the needle faster than it will naturally on its own given limited resources. But let us know what you think about the situation. Does it upset you? Have you tried to get solar panels installed in your particular state? What's been your experience with that? Comment below and remember to subscribe to Lit TV.